You wake up in the morning, and the first thing you're confronted with is chaos. The uncertainty of the day, the weight of responsibility, and the nagging voice that says you're not prepared. But here's the truth. You cannot master that chaos alone. You need order. You need structure. When you wake up in the morning, you are immediately confronted with chaos. The chaos is not necessarily dramatic, but it is ever-present, lying in the uncertainty of the hours ahead. You don't know precisely how the day will unfold. You don't know who will demand your attention, what problems will emerge, or what unexpected obstacles will block your path. Every morning you rise out of sleep into a world that is bigger than you, a world that does not bend itself to your will, a world that demands engagement whether you feel ready or not. That is the chaos that greets you at the threshold of consciousness. It is the unknown, the unpredictable, and the unformed potential of the day. Chaos can appear in countless forms. It might be the simple but weighty reality of unanswered messages and unfinished work. It might be the interpersonal friction you sense waiting for you at home or at work. It might be the larger existential weight, the realization that time is moving forward and you are still wrestling with the same flaws, the same weaknesses, the same temptations that seem to follow you year after year. Sometimes chaos even manifests as the voice inside your own mind, whispering that you are inadequate, unprepared, or doomed to fail before you even begin. These are not small matters. They are the very conditions of human life. To ignore them is to be blindsided by them again and again. If you examine carefully, chaos is not only the external disorder of your schedule or your surroundings, it is also the internal fragmentation of your thoughts and emotions. You might awaken already overwhelmed, already pulled in multiple directions by fears, by regrets, by desires. That is a state of chaos within, and if left unchecked, it governs your entire day. Many people rise in the morning and immediately immerse themselves in distractions, reaching for their phones, scrolling through images, news, and noise. That habit is not harmless. It is a way of handing the reins of your mind to chaos before you have even taken your first breath of clarity. What makes chaos so difficult is that it never arrives fully defined. It comes in possibilities, in vague shapes, in the open potential what could go wrong or what might demand your attention. In this sense, chaos is the raw material of existence itself. Every morning you are stepping into that unformed potential, and the question is whether you will engage with it consciously or allow it to shape you unconsciously. To deny the presence of chaos is to live in naivete. To face it honestly is to recognize that life is not safe, not simple, not fully predictable, and that your own strength will always have limits. When you open your eyes and feel that weight, you are not encountering something abnormal or unjust. You are encountering the human condition itself. Chaos is the constant backdrop of existence, and it is the testing ground where your choices matter most. It will always be there when you rise in the morning, waiting for you at the edge of awareness, pressing you to decide whether you will drift aimlessly into its grip or confront it with order, meaning, and alignment. Order begins with responsibility. And this truth is one of the most profound realities you can grasp about your life. Without responsibility, there's only drift, only aimless wander in a world that is already complicated enough. Responsibility is the act of saying to yourself, I will carry what is mine to carry. It is a decision to shoulder the weight of existence rather than pretending that someone else or some circumstance will do it for you. This is not a pleasant idea for most people. Responsibility sounds heavy, and it is heavy, but it is also the very thing that gives life shape and coherence. Without it, your days blur together, stripped of meaning, because there is nothing grounding you, nothing binding your choices into a pattern that matters. When you assume responsibility, you introduce order into the chaos that surrounds you. Think about the smallest tasks in your day. If you make your bed, clean your space, prepare yourself with care, you have already transformed a fragment of chaos into order. It is not trivial because it demonstrates that you can impose structure on at least one corner of your reality. And if you can impose order on a small corner, then perhaps you can expand that outward into larger domains of life. Responsibility scales in this way, beginning with the smallest acts of discipline and extending toward the heaviest burdens you are capable of carrying. There is also something deeply moral about responsibility. To take responsibility is to recognize that your actions matter not only for yourself, but for the people around you. If you shirk responsibility, you generate disorder that ripples outward into your family, your work, your community. Neglect breeds suffering. On the other hand, when you stand firm and say, "I will bear the weight," you contribute to the maintenance of order for more than just yourself. You become a stabilizing force. People around you can rely on you. They can trust that you will show up, that you will carry what must be carried. That trust is the foundation of meaningful relationships and the cornerstone of a life that moves in the right direction. What is striking about responsibility is that it is voluntary. You cannot be forced to truly accept it. You can be compelled by external authority to perform tasks, but genuine responsibility arises from within. It is an internal commitment, a choice to align yourself with what is higher, rather than sinking into the comfort of passivity. This voluntary acceptance is what makes responsibility noble. It is not simply duty imposed from outside. It is a willful act of courage that says, "I will not hide from the weight of life." The paradox is that while responsibility appears to limit you because it binds you to obligations, it actually sets you free. It frees you from the aimlessness that leaves you anxious and lost. It frees you from the despair of believing that nothing matters. It frees you from being tossed about by every wave of circumstance because you have chosen a point of orientation. Responsibility does not crush you. It holds you together. It organizes the fragments of your life into something coherent, into something that has direction. When you accept it, you are not diminished. You are elevated because you are stepping into the order that makes existence meaningful. Prayer aligns you with higher truth, and this is not merely a religious sentiment, but a psychological and spiritual necessity. Human beings are finite, fragile, and prone to error. Left to our own devices, our thoughts scatter, our desires conflict, and our goals often contradict one another. We are easily swayed by impulse, by fear, by pride, and by the endless distractions that pull us away from what really matters. In that state, we drift, vulnerable to the chaos that surrounds us. But prayer is a deliberate act of reorienting yourself, of acknowledging that there exists something greater than your own limited perspective, something that stands above the noise and confusion of daily life, something that embodies truth in its purest form. When you pray, you are not simply speaking words into the air. You are humbling yourself before a higher order of reality, admitting that your own wisdom and strength are insufficient. That act itself is transformative because it reshapes your posture toward life. Pride isolates you and blinds you, but prayer corrects that pride by forcing you to acknowledge your dependency. It is an act of honesty because the truth is that you cannot control everything, and pretending otherwise only leads to frustration and despair. Prayer is a surrender, but not a surrender to weakness. It is a surrender to truth, which is stronger than you, higher than you, and more stable than anything you can produce on your own. There is also an ordering effect that prayer exerts on the mind. When you turn your attention to God, you are aligning your scattered thoughts with an axis that does not shift. Instead of being pulled in 1,000 directions, you fix your attention on the highest possible point. And by doing so, you allow your lesser concerns to fall into their proper place. Many of the anxieties that seem overwhelming shrink when measured against the eternal. The resentments, the trivial irritations, the fleeting temptations, they're all rebalanced when you recall in prayer that your life is being weighed and measured against something eternal, something unshakable. That awareness alone has the power to transform your attitude, your decisions, and your behavior. Prayer also brings order to your desires. Left unchecked, desire is chaotic. One moment you want comfort, the next you want power, the next you want escape. These impulses clash within you, and without direction they generate disorder in your life. But prayer brings your desires under examination. In prayer, you confront what you are asking for, what you are longing for, and whether those desires align with God's truth or stand in opposition to it. This is a refining process, one that disciplines the heart. Prayer does not always give you what you ask for, but it shapes you into someone who asks differently. Someone who is oriented toward truth rather than deception. Someone who seeks what endures rather than what decays. Through prayer, you also participate in a relationship with the divine. This relationship is not abstract. It is dynamic, personal, and guiding. In that relationship, you are reminded daily that your life is not isolated or meaningless. You are connected to a higher order of being, and that connection infuses your actions with purpose. To align yourself with truth in prayer is to step into a reality where your choices matter eternally, where your suffering is not wasted, and where your victories are not merely personal triumphs, but reflections of a greater order. Prayer grounds you in truth, and in doing so, it lifts you above the endless noise of the world and aligns you with the highest standard by which life can be lived. Humility opens the door to strength, and this is a paradox that human beings often resist. Most people imagine strength as something visible, loud, and dominating, but the deepest kind of strength does not come from force or arrogance. It comes from recognizing your own limitations and placing yourself in proper relation to reality. Humility is not weakness, nor is it self-contempt. It is a sober acknowledgement of your flaws, your fragility, and your dependency, paired with the willingness to act responsibly despite them. Without humility, strength becomes brittle, hollow, and ultimately destructive because it is built on the illusion of self-sufficiency. With humility, strength is rooted in truth, and truth is a foundation that cannot be shaken. When you practice humility, you admit that you are not the center of the universe. You acknowledge that there are forces beyond your control, truths beyond your comprehension, and responsibilities greater than your comfort. This posture creates space for wisdom, because only those who admit they do not know everything are capable of learning. Arrogance closes the mind, but humility opens it, making you receptive to correction, to guidance, to growth. That openness is itself a form of strength, because it arms you with the ability to adapt, to improve, to endure. The humble person is not easily broken by failure, because they already know they are imperfect. They can rise after falling, because their self-worth was never tied to the illusion of invulnerability. Humility also shapes the way you interact with others. Without it, relationships collapse under the weight of pride, selfishness, and domination. With humility, you can listen, you can serve, and you can forgive. You do not need to win every argument or assert your superiority in every situation, because your value is not dependent on proving yourself above others. This creates stability in your relationships and allows you to build trust. Trust is a form of strength that no amount of arrogance can ever replicate. When people know you are humble, they know you are safe to approach, safe to confide in, safe to depend on. That reliability is an enduring form of strength that outlasts mere appearances of power. Humility is also essential in the spiritual life. To pray, to seek God, to live in alignment with higher truth, requires humility. It requires admitting that you are not the highest authority, that you cannot save yourself, that you are in need of grace and guidance. That act of submission is not a diminishment. It is the beginning of transformation. Only the humble can receive strength from God, because only the humble are willing to admit their need for it. Pride keeps the soul closed, but humility opens it wide, making room for divine power to work through human weakness. There's another dimension to humility that directly confronts suffering. Life will inevitably bring pain, loss, and hardship. The arrogant person resists reality, rages against it, and is broken by it. The humble person, however, bows under the weight without losing dignity, because they do not expect the world to revolve around their desires. They endure suffering with grace, and in that endurance, they discover strength they did not know they had. Humility, then, is not the denial of self, but the right orientation of self. And in that orientation, the greatest and most enduring strength emerges.